I'm presenting you Ottavio Rizzo and Valentina Vaccaro. Okay, is it a bit okay? Professor Rizzo is assistant professor in mathematics at the University of Milan, and Professor Dr. Vaccaro is a PhD student also in mathematics, of course, and she's also a research technical partner at INVALSI. And their paper is, as I said before, linked to the first paper. So we're again with the mathematics teachers, which I like a lot. But now we're looking into attitudes and beliefs of these smart teachers, and also while implementing teaching for competences. And I read a part in the paper that intrigued me. You mentioned that a teacher who is teaching for competences, what you will be looking at, will require good problems. And these are problems which are meaningful, comprehensible, authentic, and inclusive. And when I think of good math teachers, my good math teachers, I really think of these teachers. So the floor is yours, and surprise us.
In this talk, we present and discuss the early results of an interdisciplinary research project aiming at studying the connection between the INVALSI assessment, mathematics teaching, and learning processes at the primary school level. The basic assumption of the research is that the complex system of data revolving around the INVALSI assessments can be viewed as a tool. For students, the INVALSI assessments are a tool which is useful to get feedback on their learning. For the teachers, it is a tool to design and implement meaningful teaching activities. The assessments, though, can and should be used also as a tool for the professional development of teachers, fostering a more effective didactic impact of the test that goes well beyond training for the tests. Yeah, you were referring before to the idea of good problem. Now, I was really influenced by Pietro Di Martino talking about the use of good problems and also the issue of the definition of what is a good problem. It's one of those things where you can say that if you see a good problem, you can recognize it, but it's difficult to define it. So that was a good definition, or if not, you can say that a good problem is also a problem where a student doesn't know in advance which knowledge is required for the solution. So it's not, I have to use these tools because the exercise is in the chapter about this tool. So that's not a good problem, that's an exercise. And where the exploration is possible and resolution strategies are manifold. And so we strongly believe that many INVALSI items could be used in the schoolroom as a source of good problems. Now, do teachers share the same view? And if some of them do, which kind of teacher does? So as the first presentation said, this project is part of an interdisciplinary research project led by the Italian Society for Educational Research, which put together researchers in disciplinary education, well, we are the mathematicians, in general education, and the first talk were the colleagues in general education and expert teachers. In order to investigate through the voice of teachers perceptions, meanings, and practices of teachers with respect to the INVALSI math test, we designed a survey that was administered to a sample of more than 500 primary school teachers. Now, you already saw this slide, so I'm not going to say much about it. We're just focusing on the last part, the part in the middle, linking the knowledge on reading and interpreting INVALSI math items and the statements on the practices, or the teacher practices. So we want to compare the two. So according to the research variables framework, the survey, well, consists of the three sections. I mean, Elisa already and Barbara already talked about them. And in this talk, so we will mainly focus on the second section of the questionnaire, which was composed by comparative questions on the proximity and remoteness of the 7 items from teaching practices and national guidelines. Oh, they didn't say, we actually showed teachers a bunch of items, of 5th grade INVALSI assessment items. And among other things, we asked these teachers, how often do you use this kind of test? And what's your opinion on these tests as being close to your didactical approach or remote from your didactical approach? Okay. So we had a convenient sample of 526 Italian primary school teachers. It's not statistically significant because it has a lot of statistical biases. For example, most of them were invited to fill the questionnaire by their head teacher. And 71% of them came from 2 regions, from Piedmont and Emilia-Romagna. So 90% of them hold a permanent position, which is more or less average, more or less. So our sample is large. It's not statistically representative, but we still feel it gives us a good feeling of what is going on with primary school teachers. And we'll talk later on what we're going to solve this problem of it not being statistically representative.
Thank you. So the research group has carried out numerous exploratory analysis, find interesting data already analyzed in other papers, and correlation that we are still investigating, including the one we present today. In order to understand the links between the question we have decided to analyze, we would like to read them with you. And we decided to leave them in Italian on the slides and just read them in English. So I move to read those. So, for each of these classroom practices, state how often you use them. I train pupils on many questions of previous years' INVALSI tests. I talk with the pupils about the main technicalities of INVALSI tests, structure, timing, etc. I have the pupils thinking over fast and smart strategies to solve the INVALSI tests. I draw from INVALSI tests the inspiration for activities about argumentation in mathematics. And I draw from INVALSI tests the inspiration for activities about problem solving, and the last one about the justification of answers. So I have to move the next slide here. Okay. With the aim of investigating better to deepen the information, we decide to proceed with a factor analysis that allow us to identify 2 distinct factors. To label the first factor, it seems natural to us to refer to teaching to the test, while for the second, we choose the label teaching with the test, in which the goal is teaching and the test becomes as tool. And the second level analysis provides us a significant correlation between this second index and other indices of the questionnaire. So let's see that together. I don't know, I could try. No. Okay, sorry, I tried. Okay. The first index is a factor from a 9-item cluster that we decided after a long discussion of labeling as a utility of INVALSI tests to analyze, to reflect on, and to design the teaching experience. We are interested in understanding if and how much INVALSI questions could be useful for the effective teaching and learning of math. How much do you agree with the following statements? I read the questions. So, Classroom analysis of INVALSI questions help pupils to understand the importance of reflecting about their learning. The analysis of INVALSI questions helps teachers to understand which learning goals in mathematics should be attained. Teachers must refer to INVALSI outcomes when defining their learning goals. And didactical design must include activities dealing with INVALSI questions. The seventh one is the assessment test used in the classroom should include only questions like the INVALSI ones. School departments should take in consideration also INVALSI outcomes of the pupils in their work on the vertical development of the curricula. And the INVALSI outcomes of pupils should not be overlooked while designing the school curricula. It's very difficult. Okay. The second index that correlates with our factor is the one made up of questions that refer to the third part of the questionnaire, the one on personal data of the teachers. We left the first question in Italian since it really depends on the organization of Italian schools. And we were afraid that its sense would be lost in translation. And it's about having any role in your school about evaluation, apart from evaluating your students, of course. The second question is, in the past 2 years, did you take part in any teacher training programs about mathematics education or about the INVALSI assessment? The third question of the index is, in the past 2 years, did you read any papers on the INVALSI assessment or on educational assessment on scientific or professional journals? The profile of a teacher who is committed not only to classroom teaching, but also to metadidactic issues seems to emerge from this data. So, as we find reasonable the existence of a casual relationship between what we have called teaching with the test and the three indices, utility of INVALSI test to analyze, to reflect, etc., the formative assessment, and be involved teacher, we decide to implement a linear regression model that we actually present in the data. Okay. So we have the answer to our research questions. Which kind of teacher use INVALSI items as source of good problems? And the answer is that the three indices identify a teacher that is involved with evaluation at different level, members of leadership team participating to training service to professional and scientific debate, make use of formative assessment in class and also have a good attitude on formative assessment, believes in the utility of INVALSI tests to analyze, to reflect on, etc. And so we decide to that the analysis, of course, are still ongoing, and because the questionnaires has provided us a large number of data, we have to investigate more deep in the data. And we have, for this reason, request the collaboration of INVALSI to extract a significant sample. And we plan to interview a larger number of teachers, of math teachers, in the next year, in the next spring, if with COVID this is possible. And we believe that this kind of data can be useful for the training of teacher already in service and for pre-service teacher too. And we thank all the member of the group team, the research team, and of course the teachers who answer the questionnaire. Now, if we have some minutes, the questions are welcome.
Perfect in time too. And we have There's the applause, of course. And then I would suggest maybe the other way around. Are there questions from the online audience? Because I stimulated them to be very attentive and to maybe raise their hand or to write a question. And there are questions. No, oh, I'm disappointed. Yes, there is one. Great. So who's going to read the question? It's maybe in Italian. I don't know. So I think when you open the chat, the bottom, then we can maybe see. The question will be posed. Okay, thank you. You can ask your question. You can switch on your mic. I think it's...
May I ask the question?
Yes, of course.
Oh, okay, thank you very much for the very interesting presentation. I was wondering if you could share some insight or best practices on how to integrate INVALSI test and teacher practices to develop their own test. So teaching with the test practices. I mean, like leveraging on research, leveraging on the test itself. If you have any sort of insight related to teacher interview.
We haven't yet interviewed teachers. So we are programming focus groups for the spring, as Valentina was saying, in order to better understand the teacher practices. Now, I expect the difference being training. Training for the test is, these are the tests, we have rules about test making, and INVALSI spending their time trying to overcome those rules and suggestions and prepare tests which are not prone to teaching to the test. The idea, what we expect, is to use certain problems. Not every problem is okay for that, but there are a bunch of problems which could foster a significant classroom discussion. I mean, we don't have the problems to show.
Yes, on my bag. Not yet.
Oh,
not in
okay.
This computer.
Not on this computer. No, we can't really. One of the problems which we really liked, and the one that gave the most issues with teachers, was it was a gift box, which it was just a parallelepiped. I have no idea how you say that in English. Parallelepiped. And you had to put a wrap around it, and you were given the dimensions and the size of the of the loop, the nice loop you make around. And students were asked, how long should the string be? And so you have to decide how many times you count each dimensions. And there was a huge issue both for the students and the teachers. I mean, we decided not to ask the teachers, for political reasons, if you want, to answer the questions, because we didn't want to put them pressure to give the right answers. But from asking them the reasons, to recognize the reasons for the mistakes, we get some idea of what teachers understand of the questions. I mean, the problem is that you can't simply sum the dimensions, because you have to consider some of them twice and some of them 4 times. So you need to understand what's going on. And we really feel that's the kind of good problem. I mean, you should pose such a problem to pupils and let them talk about it and compare answers. I mean, really do a mathematics laboratory where they talk and discuss and try to argument. So they're actually doing math. So that would be the point. So the way we expect teachers to integrate this kind of problems, good problems, into their classroom activity is to, well, to pose them as problem, not as a training, get ready to make tests, smart ways to get the wrong solution. So you just recognize which is the wrong, which answer is wrong, and then once you are up to 2 possible good solutions, you just choose them by random, or these kind of things, which have the purpose, but
also we can say that in the first part of the questionnaire, we found a very interesting meta-didactic conflict, and we explored that in the Arzarello and Ferretti from 2021.
In the February,
in the February INVALSI data seminar. So if you are interested in, you can find other information on the questionnaire. The questionnaire have 54 questions inside, and 7 INVALSI item, which several questions on each item. So it's a very large and very huge questionnaire.
Thank you very much for your answer, and I will reach you for more details. Thanks.
Thank you so much. From the online audience, I think it's nice to have a question from there too. And I think it was a very, very, very nice question also. It maybe is linked to questions that people in the audience want to ask here on site. It's actually, it was a bit linked to my question. In the end of your answer, you said that teachers should really also consider their own mistakes and work with these mistakes somehow together. So I'm a teacher trainer. So what would you, from your study, say that is that an approach that is also maybe transversal? So not only true for mathematics teachers, because I think, for example, I'm in the domain of civic education, but we also have some the good democratic citizen. What is it? And how can we? And then I maybe see you have the professional competences, and that's something I think with math teachers that's very clear. But also I see here a personal competence, getting in there, dealing with being human maybe and making mistakes, and how to use these mistakes to teach yourself something. I don't know, but how do you see the relation between, for mathematics teachers, between the professional competences, which are clear, I guess, and those maybe more personal competences in the subject area? The openness to this kind of approach. Yeah, it's a very broad question. Yes. I know, but yes, it's something that intrigues me. Yes. And we still have time.
We focus on the errors from students, because we think that if you identify the error from a student, you are on the halfway to better to help him to better improve his learning in mathematics. So we are strongly and positively convinced that errors for the student, but also from the teachers, is a very useful tool to teaching and learning processes with students. So INVALSI has a very research group, a very deep research group on the errors from students, and we have a large amount of data on that.
Yeah, for professional, for pre-service education, I think, it sounds mean, but taking those items that got the most wrong answers and asking students, teachers in training, future teachers in training, so students, to not only to discuss what's the right solution, because that's very limitative. It's why they think pupils got the wrong solution. trying to understand how one should get the right solution and why one goes on the wrong path. And that would be very important. I mean, that's what I always ask my students in teacher training programs to do, trying to develop ideas on why students got things wrong and discuss about them.
Yeah, but I also believe that sometimes teachers can get things wrong.
Oh,
and
yeah.
And sometimes that's, I think, when, for example, with in-service teachers already, that's not an easy thing to work with, maybe, but I think maybe an interesting.
No, it's actually, it would be actually be very complicated. As I said before, for political reasons, we decided not to ask the teachers taking the questionnaire to answer the items. Because a suggestion was, well, first thing we asked them to take the items and give us the answers and see what are the solutions. And many people were afraid of the data we would have got.
Yeah. And for me, that's also interesting, because I think for me this also points to how we should proceed in pre-service teacher training education somehow. But yeah, of course, not every teacher is in that stage in his or her career. So how do you deal with professional development? But hey, that's maybe for another another panel. I think we still have 8 minutes, so we still have time for some questions. Otherwise, are there still no questions anymore? Otherwise, we can close this session a little bit early, but I want to thank the presenters so much. I suppose that also questions can be asked to the people here on site during coffee. So thank you all and have a nice conference.